Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra, and this is Human Potential at Work. One thing that we do with this podcast, which is different from many others, is we make sure that it's live captioned. We are blessed to partner with My Clear Space. My Clear Text, and they're just wonderful captioners. But sometimes when you have all these moving parts, it's a little bit more of a challenge, but we believe that this podcast should be fully accessible to everyone. So we want to make sure that we're doing captioning and transcription. So welcome to the program. I am the CEO of Rue Global Communications, and we are strategists, brand ambassadors, and market influencers for the community of people with disabilities, and also for the aging market, including the baby boomers, which I'm proud to be part of. Today, you will recognize my guest. It is Doug Foresta, who has been on the program many times. He is also our producer, and he is a talk show host all on his own. He was a talk show host before I was, and we are about to announce right now that he has a new show that's coming on our network, Global Impact Today, called Mind Talk. And it is all about our beautiful brains and mental health. And I can't speak for you who is listening or watching this, but I know my life is so intense, and everybody I know is walking pretty intense experiences right now. My daughter Sarah just got out of the hospital, and she has IBS right now, irritable bowel syndrome, which, oh my goodness, what a difficult thing that can be. And we feel like we're walking on pins and needles quite a bit, and we're doing everything we can to keep her healthy along the way. And I'll let Doug talk a little bit about some of his fun experiences, including having two babies under the age of 2, and one of them that was born premature. So, Doug, welcome to the program.
Welcome, Deborah. Yeah, we have zero stress in our lives, right? Just and as we were saying, unless you're heavily medicated, if you're walking around on this earth right now, you probably are experiencing some level of stress in your life.
Yeah, it's intense, and the political situations in the different countries, just to add even more, and the fake news and the negativeness, and the life is very intense right now. And making sure that we acknowledge it first, and that we make sure that we do whatever we can do to keep ourselves healthy first. I know you, as a social worker, have told me this, Doug. We always use, a lot of people use the analogy of when you're in an airplane, put it on first, and then you help your children. Because if you are so worried about helping them that you collapse,
you're not going to be much good to anyone else. Yeah, and so I'll just say a little bit about why I wanted to do a show about the mind, and really Mind Talk really encompasses, I think, spirituality and emotions as well. It's not like we're only going to, it's not the Mr. Spock show. We're going to talk about emotions too. But I think that, one of the things that I notice that's happening is the world feels more sped up. I think a lot of that is because of technology, and you've had some amazing guests on to talk about some of the reasons for that and the impact of technology. But specifically, think about human potential. I remember in college, I had a college professor who said, there's 3 things that get in the way of goal-directed behavior: addiction, depression, and anxiety. He said those 3 things, if you can manage your life so that your life is not swallowed up by addiction, depression, or anxiety, that you could pretty much accomplish anything you want to accomplish in life. And what's happening is that it's become harder for us to really, when we live out of fear, when we live out of stress, when we're addicted to, I think one of the biggest addictions right now is our devices. We've talked about that, our devices, our need for immediate information, our need to be angry at someone else, who doesn't believe in, that's an addiction in itself, the being addicted to just being angry at whoever the other side is that you don't like, who's ruining everything. And if it wasn't for them, your life would be great. That these three things get in the way of us reaching our full human potential. So I wanted to kind of just give people a little bit of preview of what we're going to do, but also have a conversation with you, Debra, about, there's a lot going on in your life, and I think our audience members and our viewers and listeners, I'm sure that they have a lot going on in their life too, and to really stop and think about, am I living out of an emotional space and a mind space that allows me to reach my full human potential, or am I maybe falling into one of those three buckets? What's showing up in my life right now?
Right. And how do we handle it?
And how do we handle it? Right.
Because on top of it, yay, the holidays are here.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. They told me in a song.
That's right. And my sister was saying, you've got to come to my house. You've got to. But my son, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, then you start feeling, and of course, food is is a big issue in our home right now, because our daughter Sarah is so vulnerable right now if she eats the wrong things. We have coined a term at our house called a pain storm, and Sarah can start to feel, it's interesting, Doug. We have had Kate on talking about chronic pain and the opiate addiction and the opiate crisis, and she was talking about chronic pain and how we live with chronic pain. And I did not know that my daughter, Sarah, born with Down syndrome, was living with chronic pain. I knew something was wrong, but I did not realize that a family member was actually living with chronic pain. And she did not have the communication skills to tell me that she was in chronic pain. She instead would display behaviors that we didn't find acceptable. I thought she's addicted to her technology, which she is. And she would tell me that she was pregnant and she could feel the baby moving.
Right.
I mentioned that before. I knew she wasn't pregnant. I absolutely knew she wasn't pregnant because I do know where Sarah is,
right,
all the time. And, but it actually was a very, very good description, because she had a major blood clot in her abdomen. It was really the vein going into her liver, and she could feel it moving around. So it was actually a really good description, right, even though, right. And so with all of that stuff, the holidays, the intensity, the political situations, we need to certainly go back to the basics of how do we stay healthy.
Yes.
And, what do we do? And Doug, I was watching I've talked about on this program too, that my husband of 36 years, who I adore, and he's my greatest mentor and teacher, he is walking the path of early onset dementia because of a former traumatic brain injury when he was a child. And worst thing you could do with early onset dementia is stress. So these beautiful brains that we have, we don't really know anything really about our brains. And I was watching a YouTube yesterday from, his name is Dr. Daniel Amen.
Yes. A-N-N. Change your brain, change your life. Yeah, he's great.
Okay, now I did not know about this man. I'm hoping he will come on the program. But
yeah, he's great.
Wow. He said him and his partner have done 83,000 brain scans, and he's wondering and really pushing the mental health professionals to say, why are you not looking at this organ you're treating? If we are a heart doctor, the heart doctor is going to look at your heart. If you are Sarah just was in the hospital and she had a blood clot, but she also had really bad intestinal and bowel wall problems. So the doctors figured that out by looking at the organs through a CT scan, through sonogram, and they looked at the organs that were telling us something was wrong. And yet in psychiatry, we don't look at our brains. And right. He's like, how can you really properly diagnose what's going on without looking at the organ that you're trying to take care of? And I was like, I don't know, that is a really good question. And Doug, you're in that field, but he would, in this talk, now that I know of this man, I'm like looking at all of his talks, but yeah. he was showing us images on some of his YouTube talks. He was showing images of different brains
Right.
of people that have schizophrenia, epilepsy, all these different ADHD brains. It was so interesting. And he said, of course, different brains display these things in different ways.
Right.
And so we're at the very beginning, we're scratching the surface of the brain. And it's fascinating in a way that we don't look at we have science and technology that will allow us to at least look at the brain and then maybe compare it. And I was saying to my husband this morning, I said, you have a new neurologist, and I'm going to ask them when you go in if they'll do another brain scan. And he's like, I don't want to do another one. I said, well, we should, because we haven't done a brain scan on you in 2 years. And I think it would be good just to see what your beautiful brain is doing. So the science behind all this, Doug, and how it applies to the mental health field, I think that's fascinating. But at the same time, they're well-known techniques of what we can do to handle anxiety and intensity in our lives, like meditation.
Right.
So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, yeah, I love Dr. Daniel Amen, and one of the books, I think it was one of his first books, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, and accessible book. I mean, it was and I think it was a New York Times bestseller, so it wasn't just written for psychologists or social workers. And what we know, I mean, you don't need to be a neurosurgeon in order to understand that, we do understand more about the brain now than a lot more about the brain than we did. In World War I, you've heard the term shell shock. It was they would when soldiers would have what we would now call PTSD, oftentimes the treatment was they would slap them across the face and then throw them into the back of the lines and shame them. We now know that's not an effective treatment for trauma. I think one of the things I could share with our listeners and viewers is that, one of the things that we understand about the brain now is that there's basically 3 parts of the brain that evolved. There's the stem of the brain, which we share with reptiles and snakes and lizards and all those things. That's like the most primitive brain. And then there's over that is the mammalian brain, which is what we share with dogs and pretty much any what we call the limbic system. Anyone with a limbic system can love. So your dog can love you, right? Your cat can love you. Your snake, not so much. Don't probably fall in love with your python, because it's not going to love you back. It doesn't have that part. It doesn't have that capacity because it doesn't have that brain structure. And then we have the third part of our brain, which is the right up here, which is the neocortex, or that's sort of that's where language and the highest level of of brain function, I guess you could say. I mean, hard to say highest, because that reptilian brain is really important too, because it just regulates little things like breathing and your heart, and just tiny little things. What's interesting is that the most primitive part of your brain will immediately, so if under stress, for example, if you hear a loud noise like a boom or something, the first part of your brain that's going to react is that amygdala. It's going to be that same part as that evolutionary piece that will immediately will jolt, will have some kind of fight or flight reaction. It will override you're not going to just calmly go, boy, that sounded like a gunshot. Let me and there's a reason for that, right? That's because it allows us to flinch. It allows us to have an immediate reaction. Problem is, that works really well if you are, if, for example, you're in the woods and you hear a bear, right? It's an immediate, concrete thing. But what if you're worried about, for example, your health of a loved one, and it's an ongoing issue, hypothetically? A bear in the woods, that's not a one-time thing that I can get away from the bear and now I'm safe. It's an ongoing stress that I need to manage. Most of our life today is not running away, fortunately. I know you do live near the woods, Debra, so still, I haven't heard you talk a lot about running away from bears. Most of our life is chronic stress. And what happens is the amygdala then takes over, and we're basically living out of our reptile brain. We're living out of a very limited, you know, obviously snakes don't have a lot of stress management tools. So what we want to do is we want to be able to engage the neocortex, the front part of the brain, can calm the amygdala down. And how does it work? It works through meditation, through things like, cognitive, thinking through your problems, all of those, anything that engages. So what we want to do is we want to kind of we want to learn how to cool our brains down and use that front part of our brain, calm down the middle part of our brain.
That's so interesting. So what I do to handle the intensity of my life is I'm a big fan of YouTube. And so I go out and I listen to, speeches like with Dr. Daniel Amen, and I'm a big fan of Abraham Hicks' works, love that work. And or I'll pick up a Bible, or I'll pick up any spiritual work, or there's different things that in music, especially certain kinds of music, will really calm me down too. And I don't know why, Doug, but I'm finding that when I feel stress, which I feel it a lot right now, just while my family's sick, but I feel it seems to be right around my chest area. Mm-hmm. And I think that we probably all hold stress in our bodies in different ways. I would assume, I don't know if that's true, but I seem to hold mine right around my chest area, which is probably not good for me. But I also am a fiend when it comes to exercise. I love exercise. My favorite is Zumba. Dancing. I love,
That's great.
Love it. I'm not going to ever be a famous dancer, but I love it.
That's not the point, right? Exactly.
No, I love it. It is joy to me. I get to go to Diane or Janika's Zumba classes, and I get just pure joy from it. And so I think anything that we can do to find joy in our lives, that seems to help me manage my stress. And I also spend a lot of time every day trying to find things to be grateful for. And it's amazing what you can be grateful for. I have so much beauty in my life. Doug, I'm very grateful for you. I'm grateful
thank you.
Yeah, I'm grateful for so much. And focusing on gratitude helps me with my stress as well as I meditate and things like that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we're going to talk about so many different things. I mean, when so many things going through my mind, I don't want to overload listeners, but one thing I will say is, one thing I will talk about is heart math, because even though we talk about mind, the heart, have you ever heard of heart math?
I haven't. No.
Oh, they're wonderful. So if you go to heartmath.org, they've done all this research. Did you know that the cells of the heart have their own intelligence? They know that they are heart cells. You can't really put them anywhere else.
That's so cool.
They're just the cells of your heart, and that's all they're good for. And the heart has its own, obviously it beats its own rhythm. It has its own electrical system. It's really amazing. And so HeartMath has done all this stuff with, they do a lot of stuff connecting the heart and gratitude. And they have these little quick, like 30-second meditations, gratitude in through your heart, that are very calming, and not just calming, but also can really change the state of your body from stress to, And the nice thing is, you may have heard this before, but you can't be in a state of gratitude and a state of stress at the same time.
I didn't know that, but that makes sense. That's probably why I know that I have to be calm. And I use the Calm app too. I'm a big fan of the Calm app. I actually bought the whole year of it. I liked it so much.
That's awesome.
Some stuff I was doing because I know it helps, but I didn't know why it helped. So you're explaining that. So heartmath.org. That's
heartmath.org. We'll definitely talk about that stuff. Maybe you can get some.
I was going to say, have them on air. Yeah.
Yeah, have them on. I want to say something too. It's interesting. I went to the doctor yesterday for a physical, and my doctor said something to me that I thought was really insightful, and people may or may not agree with it, but I think it's at least useful to think about when we think about the last couple of years and how crazy it seemed it seems, in terms of people are so angry with each other. We're so divided. And he was talking about first of all, they said he wanted to go get a pair of glasses. Do you know how many manufacturers there are of glasses in the United States?
No.
One.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, I was going to say hundreds
So
of thousands.
ultimately, the lenses for glasses, it's all one manufacturer. If somebody finds another one, let me know. I'm not an expert on glass manufacturing, but that is my understanding. It's a monopoly. Likewise, he was talking about the media, and there's been so much consolidation. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's probably somewhere around 10 major media outlets. It might even be less. That all of the media outlets locally, regionally, they're all pretty much owned. Anything major, any of them that's not your just local town newspaper, are owned by very few. It's a very few of them. So that what you have is, you have, for example, one mega corporation, right? And they go, are you a lefty? Here's a channel for you. Are you a right-wing person? Here's a channel for you. Are you libertarian? Here's a channel for you. And all the channels are dedicated to then, look what they said on this one. And they're all yelling at each other. But meanwhile, there's one person making money we're all getting angry at each other down here. And there's one person who's just stirring us up so that, we'll go over to Fox News and get angry about that. Then we'll go back to CNN and we'll get angry there. And it's really unhealthy. It's really unhealthy for us. I'm not saying don't care about politics or don't vote. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, even if you want to see change in the world, positive change, which we all do, what use is it going to be to stir yourself up and live in anger and stress and fear? But understand that there are forces in the world that are kind of stirring us up to do that. There's also another gentleman whose name shall remain nameless.
Gentleman? That's an interesting, if you're talking about who I'm thinking, the word gentleman is an interesting word.
He rarely gets the word gentleman used without him yet.
Yeah, we won't go political. So
no.
Yes.
But the point being, there's so much coming at us. There's so much coming at us that we have to carve out. We can't. I think one of the mistakes we make, and this is my goal for this, is I hope that we can become more intentional. Just like we have to be intentional now. Like, for example, I know for myself, a lot of times I'm hungry and I just grab stuff. I'm on the go. I grab something. Sarah doesn't have that luxury now.
No.
When she have to be, and your family have to be more intentional about eating. And that's not it's harder, but it's not a bad thing per se, right?
I agree. She's going to be so much healthier for it.
Yeah.
She's feeling better, but what we experienced on 2 Delta flights, God bless Delta. I would not wish on anyone on the flight from Costa Rica to Atlanta, and then on the flight from Atlanta to Richmond. I feel very sure that I will be traumatized. And Sarah, of course, is the one dealing with it. I'm helping her.
But you were there too. You were there too.
Right. And what's interesting, Doug, you talked about this too, that because there are so many people that are caregivers, because we love the people in our lives. And I had been talking to you about watching my daughter in this kind of pain and the fears associated with it. She's going to have emergency surgery. She's not going to make it. And you were explaining to me, I think so eloquently, about what was happening to my body as I watched my beautiful, amazing daughter go through pain that I've never seen anybody experience. At one point, her eyes rolled back in her head due to the pain. And I thought, and I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but you were explaining about what happens to the caregiver's body and our mind as we're trying to support loved ones. So talk about that, because I think we really need to focus. We need to understand what's happening with the caregivers, especially because this is happening, with 72 million Americans in the United States being over the age, the youngest baby boomer is 54. And
Right.
so about to be 55. And a lot of us did not take as good a care of ourselves as we're the generation where they were introducing all this processed food and all this stuff
Right.
to us that wasn't
Yeah.
very healthy.
The microwave. Yeah.
Yes, the microwave, the cigarettes was really the generation before us, but we were still impacted by it. Secondhand smoke, blah, 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 blah. But many of us are playing the role of caregivers, and it can be very, very hard on our minds and bodies.
Yeah, it's funny. We can do a whole episode, and I'm just saying we can do a whole episode on caregiver burnout. I'll say a little bit first before I say something about caregiver burnout, about vicarious traumatization. So when you talk about the idea of watching someone you love experience trauma, and I think I've said this to you before, I think most people would rather experience would you rather be shot, or would you rather watch your loved one be shot and be able to do nothing about it?
I'll take the shot.
Right. If you said to me, would I rather watch my babies be shot or take one in the leg myself? I would much rather take it, because I can deal with it, right? But to have to watch someone else is actually, in many ways, harder. And there is something called vicarious traumatization, which basically, the simplest way I can put it is, trauma is contagious. Anyone who works in mental health knows this. Trauma is contagious. You can catch it. You can catch trauma. So you have to understand that and not say, oh, well, it wasn't me. I wasn't there, because then that also increases the guilt. How dare I experience?
Right.
But
I'm not going through this.
Doesn't work that way. Trauma is contagious. We know that. We know that if we witness or even hear about, in certain cases, something traumatic that someone experienced, that we ourselves can become traumatized. And every therapist knows this, but I think we have to remind ourselves of that as parents, as caregivers, as people who exist in the world. So another reason that we have to be careful, like, for example, I know you're really careful about in the what you watch on TV, or
yes, I am.
You don't want to increase that level of trauma in your life. And then there's also burnout, which is different, but there's only a certain amount of compassion that we can have if we're just constantly putting that out. Like, if we're just putting out and we're not giving back and we're not replenishing, we can burn out. And I don't think I'm telling people anything they don't know with that, but I think what's important is, again, we have to be intentional, that we can't be like, oh, I'm selfish to go to Zumba, or I'm selfish to stop and do meditation, or I'm selfish to take care of myself. You're not going to be good to anyone. Yes, the cliche, the oxygen mask, but and they still do tell you every time you take a flight, they will tell you to do it. It's literally true.
It is. And it's also interesting, as with Sarah, unfortunately, she started throwing up on the plane, one of the rides on the plane, and the other passengers. Can you think of people complain about having crying babies around them? Well, you have somebody that is throwing up so much, the flight attendants are bringing over garbage bags, and
Wow.
I will tell you, the passengers around us, they were so kind. They were so empathetic. Sarah and I was on the aisle, Sarah was in the middle, and there was a gentleman on the window seat as this unfolded. And the kindness, the empathy, really the love that these strangers were showing our family during an intense time, it really made me feel grateful. And it actually really helped us as we walked that. And almost every single person was just so beautiful and empathetic. And so I think that helps also. But I think there's so much to talk about when it comes to being healthy. And I was watching a show yesterday that I at one point I thought, you have got to stop watching this show, Debra. But I thought, well, I'm already, at this point, I was almost through with it. And I think the name of the show, it's on Netflix, and I think it's called God Knows Where I Am. And it's a really sad show about a woman that had severe mental health issues, schizophrenia,
Oh,
and
wow.
her family was doing everything they could to protect her. She was in a facility. The facility made a decision to let her out. Her sister had tried to take over her health, power of attorney. I forget what that's called, and she convinced the judge that she shouldn't have that taken away from her, and so they let her out. And she wound up starving to death in a farmhouse
Oh.
in New Hampshire in the winter, when just right across the street people would have helped her, but her mind was in a place
She
that
couldn't access the help. Yeah.
she couldn't get help. And so they tell the story because what she did was she wrote a diary about it, and she said, well, I know God knows where I am. And it was so poignant, and it just shows us that I think we'll look back years from now and say, how were we trying to help people with mental health disorders when we weren't looking at their brains and we didn't
Right.
understand the brains, and how beautiful at the same time. We still have so much more to learn. We're not going to be bored.
Yeah.
But I can't think of anything more important than really understanding our brains and the way our brains work, and how do we really help each other. So I think your show is going to be really, really important. I really recommend that
Thank
people
you,
watch
Deborah.
it. But
Thank you. And I know we're bumping up on time, so I'll just leave this last thought, connecting it back also to disability. That one of my hopes too for the show is getting a better understanding of. We have more. You talked about empathy, and I think sometimes it's a little bit easier for us. Maybe, but it can be a little bit easier for us when we see concrete disabilities that we can see. So someone in a wheelchair, and we can have a little bit more empathy, like, hey, you wouldn't generally, unless you're a total jerk, be like, scream at someone in a wheelchair, why are you not moving faster, get out of my way, right? Hopefully
yeah.
not, right? But what if that person is really depressed? You might scream at them and say, hey, you're moving too slow, get out of my way. And we don't necessarily, because we can't see that always. And what you talked about with Dr. Amen and brain scans, maybe we'll get there. But my hope is to really, that these things are also challenges to overcome, and we should be kind to each other and understand that we talk about this all the time, hidden disabilities. And I think mental health really falls into one of those hidden disabilities.
I agree. And Doug, make sure that tell the audience,
how
they're going to be able to find your show. And,
Sure. Absolutely. So our first one is going to be, actually, are we going to stream it on okay, so I wasn't sure. So we'll stream it here on this page. And our first one is going to be Tuesday at 12 Eastern, next Tuesday, which is the right before Thanksgiving, which I think is great. 20th, Tuesday,
right.
At 12 Eastern time. So I hope you can join us, and would love to get your feedback and any topics that you want us to cover.
Right. And what we'll do is we'll make sure all of these episodes will be out on www.ruglobal.com. And we'll make sure that everybody knows how to get to them. But I think it's going to be a really, really important show. So I'm very, very excited about, your voice, Doug. So
thank
you,
Debra.
everybody, for joining us. Thanks again for Orla from My Clear Text for joining us and doing the captioning, making sure that this is fully accessible. And thanks to Doug Foresta, and good luck with your show, Mind Talk, Doug.
Thank you so much, Debra.